Copy Room Conversations is brought to you in partnership with Dirt Path Publishing. What started as a small independent publishing house dedicated to publishing work for social impact now also includes coaching and editing services for writers, led by a small and mighty team of former high school teachers. These folks know how to have the hard conversations writers need to have in service to producing their very best work. And they know how to have those hard conversations with love. For more information about coaching and editing services for writers, visit dirtpathpublishing.com. Mrs. Pamela Wilson is my 3F mentor: first, favorite, and forever. We met when I was in high school, and even though she was never my teacher, she found a way to mentor me in 100 other ways. When I returned to my high school to be a teacher, she took on her role as my mentor with new gusto, watching over me, planning lessons with me, speaking hard truths to me when I needed it. She also modeled for me what it is to learn from those who come after you, showing curiosity about the way I approached my work, seeking my advice and thoughts when she had challenges of her own. My first 2 years of teaching, we kept a journal together, writing to one another back and forth, dropping that journal in each other's mailbox at the end of each week as we eagerly awaited its return the week following. I was a terrible teacher in those days. I loved my kids, but had no idea what it meant to truly teach them. Pam knew that, and like any good teacher, she met me right where I was to usher me forward. Even then, she knew I was a writer, and that journal was the very best tool she could provide me to reflect, explore, emote, share, and learn. I have kept a journal about my teaching ever since, and I'm a better person and educator because of it. In truth, because of Pam. In this episode, we talk about the early years of our teaching and many of the years after, including an annual trip of colleagues she organized and supported for 20 years. I share the story of this group, the Malbs, in the Season 1 introduction episode. If you haven't listened to that yet, please pause this episode and go do so. It'll give you a depth of understanding for why I've chosen the guests for this season, and why the very first episode simply had to feature Pam. Pam is my soul mother, a mother not by blood, but by spirit. She and I were both quiet, shy children who struggled with anxiety and a deep desire to be loved. Like her, I am strong and confident on the outside, and people are usually surprised to hear that I struggle with knowing my value, that I worry I'm not good enough, that I spent many decades killing myself trying to be perfect, only to learn, in large part because of my students, that the job of this life is not to be perfect, it's to be whole. Pam and I grew into ourselves as teachers, finding most of the lessons we needed to learn in the classroom with and from our students. She was a role model for me when I was a student, as a young teacher, as a veteran teacher, and now as a middle-aged woman, just about the age she was when she and the other middle-aged lunch bunch first got together. This episode is a love letter to her, just as the whole season is a love letter to my Malbs. In this episode, listen for how Pam continues to live her life, now approaching 80 and living 2,500 miles away, having lost her husband, and engaged in the new learning of how to age gracefully. Listen for how she loves to talk about teaching, even now. Listen for the lessons of how to mentor and how to learn from those that come after you. She's sustained in this career for over 4 decades. The lessons she taught me and countless others as we waited for our copies in the copy room continue to sustain me to this day. Let's listen and learn, remembering that we belong to one another and that there's no such thing as other people's children. So, welcome, Pam Wilson. You are I told everybody you're my 3 Fs: first, favorite, and forever mentor.
That's sweet. Thank you. It's very nice to be here with you and see your beautiful face, even though other people can't.
I'm so glad you're here. I just, this has been a long time dream, as I've mentioned to you before, and I couldn't do this without having you on first. You had to be number one. So I'm thrilled you're here. Now I know some of this story, but I want to just give some backstory to people who are listening and don't know you, about your growing up, your experience in school, how all of that maybe informed you becoming a teacher, and really what you see as your purpose as a teacher. You take us back.
Well, everybody who knows me now would not believe this, but I was a very quiet child. Probably not around the house, but in school. I feel like I probably, looking back, that it probably had to do with trying to be perfect.
Mm.
And if nobody could hear you, then you didn't really make any mistakes, did you? So at the end of first grade, my mother went in for a conference, and the teacher said, I think we should probably keep her in first grade because I don't know whether she can read. My mother said, what do you mean she can read? And she said, well, I can't hear her. My mother, I probably am a lot my mother now, because my mother said, that's crazy, she can read and she's going to second grade.
Good for
But
her.
yeah, well, first I got the perfection from her, so bad for her, but then good for her for standing up for me. But I always got good grades, but I was just this invisible child, and it was really, I can't say at the time that I thought about it, but I was really comfortable being invisible. Once I realized I had going to be a teacher, I thought, I have to raise my hand. I have to speak in class.
Oh, yeah.
Since like that would kind of be my job, right?
Right.
So I made a deal with myself that I would raise my hand in every class one time. And of course, those of you who are teachers knows what happens when the quiet child raises his or her hand. Called on.
Yeah, so, always.
Yes. Well, I mean, I've been guilty of that myself. So anyway, so I did practice that strategy, but I have to tell you, it only took, it took me years to start feeling comfortable in the classroom and comfortable in the faculty room, and then comfortable in school district-wide meetings. I don't know whether I ever felt comfortable in front of the school board. I did give a retirement speech, which I thought was pretty awesome. So maybe I did get eventually comfortable doing that.
You're right. Anyone who knows you would be really surprised by that story. How, what changed for you? Or did you just learn how to cope? Did your students have anything to do with you learning how to own your voice? I mean, when I think of you, you're a woman who knows her voice and knows how to use it. And so I wonder how did that evolve?
I think that it just took time. For me, my trajectory starting teaching kindergarten. And it's one of the things, it's like kindergartners, they just love their teacher.
Yeah.
And who can, at the time there were 32 in every class at least. And, who doesn't thrive being loved?
Right.
Right. I mean, it doesn't mean it's easy. They all had all the issues, and we just didn't call them the things people call them now. Sometimes they wouldn't behave, and that's just. But then also, again, it helped me because I had two children.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I had to set limits, and that helped me too. But I give all power to the students that I taught. During the summer, I started working in the summer youth employment program. And one of my strong things that I did was to work with a tutoring program. So high school kids would tutor these little kids who came in. So that combined what I already knew and then helped me start learning. I was like, man, these high school kids are fun.
Awesome. Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether the kids are 5 or 18. They're fun, and it was a loose enough environment that I could get used to them. And so I was kind of getting irritated with, I was teaching self-contained 7th grade because San Lorenzo, got rid of their junior highs for a while.
Schools, yeah.
So I took the test to get in, and luckily Joanne Knowles, some people may remember a long time ago, she was willing to take a risk on me. Of course, she gave me like 4 preps, which at the time was like, I taught high school, or elementary school. It's 4 preps every day at least, but oh my gosh. And, when I went to the high school, it was, heavens to Betsy, what have I done?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I would come home and cry every
Mm.
day. Of course, the kids wouldn't know this. And sometimes my husband would come downstairs and go, "Are you coming in the house?" I don't know. I think I'm coming in the house. So I went to a therapist to get permission to quit teaching,
Oh,
and
wow.
he would not give me permission to quit teaching. And I took a class on what I should do for a living. And when I went to the wise person in the woods, I found myself conjugating helping verbs.
Oh my God.
I know. I was an English teacher, remember? And then the class told me I should be a salesman. I said, I already am. I'm just selling a product that nobody wants.
Yeah.
So I made up my mind to quit that first year. So this was my 17th year of teaching. And June
Wow.
I was going to quit. And so long about February, I said, well, that's it. And I told a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I stopped. I didn't stop caring. I just stopped trying to be perfect. Oh, do we
Yes.
already see a little thread coming along through
We
here?
do.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I just started having a good time with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And, lo and behold, they didn't learn less.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they learned more, but I was having a good time, and they were still fun and funny
Yes.
and challenging and never boring. And, when I
Yes.
thought about, oh my gosh, am I going to quit and go work in Macy's?
Yeah, yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
I do not mean to denigrate anybody who's working at Macy's,
Of
but,
course not.
boring. Teaching is never boring. That's all there is to
Never.
it.
So what year
Anyway,
was
so
this?
that was probably 84, 84 or 85.
84.
I taught
And
20
then
more years after that.
I was gonna make sure that that was clear. Now,
Yeah.
I came to San Lorenzo High School as a student in 1985.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
our little crew of kids, it was like you were always there, except for the kids who had you in seventh grade and then,
Right.
in the
Yeah.
earlier years.
Yeah.
But you just were like a legend in your own world there, even for us, just after a year. How do you, when you think back to that time, what strikes you as kind of the most important thing you were learning from your students? And I ask that maybe selfishly because that was my generation of kids coming
Yeah.
through. But I wonder what they taught you, because you were an English teacher, but you also taught some math, didn't you?
I
Didn't you have
did.
one of those credentials so you could teach anything?
I guess that's what the students taught me mostly was that I could just be me.
Mm,
I didn't really have to be anything else. And it's just so easy to be yourself all day. It's also, my thing is try to find the lovable thing right off the bat,
right,
really quickly.
right.
And, and look for those quiet kids.
Oh gosh, yes, yes.
And
You know what I found in coaching teachers is sometimes the teacher doesn't call on kids because she didn't like to be called on.
hmm
And we carry our stuff into the classroom, right? All of us. Whatever our
hmm
issue was or is, it's going to show up in our teaching
yeah.
and how we interact with our kids. Um, because you were a quiet student, what did you do for those kids that you wish was done for you?
Well, I don't know what they're calling it now because education does the same thing over and over again with a little twist and calls it different things.
Yes, 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 yes.
But, the think, pair, share
Mm-hmm.
would have made the world of difference to me. So I know early on I figured out if I wanted to call on everybody should have a chance for an idea.
Mm-hmm.
So by high school, it was write, share,
Mm-hmm.
and then I have a right to call on you.
Of
I
course,
can't tell you
yes.
how many times uh, Nicole would go, my hand wasn't up. I said, but you now have at least two ideas. You have
Yes.
your idea and the other person's idea. So share an idea. And see, again, I never asked whose idea it was.
Right,
So
right.
if you could share your own idea, but if you didn't feel like your idea was too great, and I said, you could say things like, well, Nicole was saying something I really thought was interesting. And, it's
Mm-hmm.
those, remember when we started learning about the sentence starters for
Sentence
kids to,
starters, yes,
yeah,
yes.
to help get them going on there. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those strategies. what I really think is that it doesn't matter what grade you teach, because I've gone in, supervising student teachers. I've gone down to really young kids where kids are doing the same sentence starters that high school kids are doing. So no matter what level, they have these little flip charts which they can
Yes.
go to and start. They're holding them when they come to a discussion about a book. And so if we can think about strategies that help all kids access
Mm-hmm.
learning and make them
Mm-hmm.
feel comfortable about sharing their learning, then you're going to have a better chance. I don't think we should be afraid to try something that seems like they don't do well.
Yeah, exactly.
At
Mm-hmm.
first, of course, they don't do well at first.
Because they don't know how.
I
That's our
don't
job
know
to
how.
teach them. I know. I know.
Exactly. You
Yeah,
know.
and I think that's what one of the many things I appreciate about you is that you see a problem and you think backwards for how to
Hmm.
scaffold
Yeah.
towards solving that problem, right? And so you would never have wanted to be cold called as a child. And
No.
so what you did is you created a system where it was a warm call,
Hmm.
right? Where the kids were well prepared and
Yeah.
you could call on any of them. And it's a warm call. It's a sign of, I want to hear your idea. Your voice matters, right? And
Yes.
so it's almost like you healed that little girl
Hmm.
inside by creating this opportunity for the kids that followed. I think that's so
Yeah.
lovely.
Could be. Very definitely. I like the warm call. I hadn't thought about that. That's good. See, that's the good way that education evolves, is that sometimes the new name is really good, really
Yeah.
describes what we're trying to do and helps people understand. Oh, a warm call. I understand. It's like a hug. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And to be able to explicitly name that for the students so they
Mm-hmm.
understand this is love, right? If I didn't love you, I wouldn't call on you. I'm not calling on you to shame you. I'm
Yes.
calling on you because I love you.
I can remember a young man who came into my classroom, and he had just been released from some sort of incarceration. And
Mm.
they told me that he could get part credit. And he was a giant guy. So imagine me standing. I've gotten shorter and shorter, but I was short then anyway, standing, and he was like, "Why are you bugging me?" And I said to him, "When I stop paying attention to you, I don't think you're worth it anymore."
Yes.
It just,
Oh my God.
and why not be obvious about that?
Yes.
And I mean, he was a giant junior. I mean, you know, you can talk to 5-year-olds like that, and you can
Hmm.
talk to big kids like that
Big
too.
kids. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the theme of this season is mentorship. And I'd like you to tell the story of the Malbs, Malbs.
Hmm.
And then I want to hear from you not only how kind of the origin story, but really how it relates to this notion of mentoring up and mentoring down, mentoring your elders and mentoring the ones behind you. Because a lot of times I think people, when they think mentorship, they think it's just me, the elder, helping
Hmm.
you, the junior. And I think the Malbs, and we're going to have everybody on this season, all the Malbs, that's all who we're going to have, because I really want to unpack how special that experience is and how important it was for all of us in our work and in our lives. So tell us about the
As
Malbs.
I said before, I went to teach high school, my 17th year of teaching. I must have been, oh dear, 26 and 17. What is that? 43, let's just say.
Okay.
Early 40s.
Early 40s.
So when I went, I was the youngest one, and I'm telling you, there was not a warm welcome.
Mm.
At the time, the culture of elementary school very different from the culture of high school.
Mm-hmm.
And at San Lorenzo High, that changed over time through
Mm-hmm.
concerted efforts of many people. And I'd like to say I was part of that,
You were absolutely one of them.
because it was
Mm-hmm.
just like, if you're a teacher and you take every Friday or most Fridays off because you need a mental health day, what does that do for me? That means I have
Mm-hmm.
to give up my prep on my Friday, where I'm
Right.
exhausted too, to go teach
Right.
your class when there may or may not be lesson plans, and the kids have already decided, oh, found out, yeah, so and so's out, so it's going to be a day off for this hour. So I wasn't, things weren't exactly welcoming. And I went from faculty room to faculty room trying to find my crowd. And I have to tell you, the original Malbs were not in the crowd. You know, there was smoking in the faculty lounge, and I was not into that. So I ended up going where the boys were. And they were a little appalled that a woman would be in their lounge, but too bad I wasn't. You know, I had been married to 2 boys, and I had 2 boys, just not afraid of boys. That's all.
Right.
But this weird thing happened as the years went by. The older people retired, and then pretty soon I was part of a more experienced generation, and the younger teachers who were coming along. I mean, really. We would have staff development day, and the 4 of us would run off to lunch together. As we said, you know, the younger people don't want to talk about mustache hair. You know, we have to have. I mean, at the time, we only saw each other at school, you know, and so it was kind of like we just have to talk about aging things, and. Well, the boys aren't interested, and we certainly aren't interested in what the boys have to say about that either. And,
right.
It was just a way of just kind of being 50, I would say. And you might understand what that means. There's something
now I'm approaching kind that, and I get that.
Unique about being 50, yeah. So we started going off together on the weekends, and so we would. We went up to Mendocino one time. We did go up to my brother and sister-in-law's cabin when it was a small cabin. I think it was you and Tovey who approached us at some point and said, can we go to lunch with you guys?
Yes.
And we're like, well, yeah, sure you can. I mean, there are many people who thought we were a club, but we were not a club. And so we were very, you know, sure, come on and go. So you all started coming to lunch with us.
We did.
And then there was the time when... I was scheduled to go to my brother's cabin with a bunch of people that were my peers, my husband and friends of ours, and there was a Cal football game on. So my husband said he couldn't go because he had to go to the Cal football game. So I put out an invitation to all the women on the staff, and again, some of the men got really upset about that, but I again did not care. And so that's when the group started, you know, making trips away. And there's something about being in the country. I mean, well, this is Yosemite in Wawona, and walking around to the swinging bridge and back, and enjoying wine, and sitting out on the deck and cooking for each other. And we couldn't stop talking teaching because we were teachers. You know, my husband would get mad at me sometimes. Like, can't you even talk about anything besides teaching? And well, yeah, I can, but I really like this stuff.
Why would you?
Yeah, right.
So it started with the 4 of you, and it was you, Cheryl, Barbara, and who was the 4th? You, Cheryl, Barbara,
Judy
Rosenberg.
Yeah, I have to also the Malbs, so everybody knows.
Yes,
it's middle age lunch bunch.
You were the Malbs.
We were the Malbs, and you know, and. What a weird word, and that's okay. And then when the other people came along, you all became the juniors.
Right. So Tovey and you were our mentor. Tovey, now I knew you from 1985 to 1990 when I was at San Lorenzo High School as a student. Because of you, which is so interesting because you were never my teacher, but you were always around. You were at all the leadership stuff.
Pain in the neck.
Yeah, you helped with the plays. You taught me how to dance when we did Grease. Like we went to Ashland together. You were always the advisor for the Ashland. And so, I came back to San Lorenzo High School literally 4 years later after college to teach because I just felt so strongly that I wanted to be a part of something that created the opportunities that you all created for me. I wanted to do that. I had a debt to pay. And like I could just get so emotional thinking about it because I wanted nothing more than to do for other kids what you all did for me. And so that very first staff development day, Tovey, who is a new teacher, she was your student teacher, wasn't she?
Yes, she was.
And then she got hired on. We both got hired on the same year. And that very first staff development day in August, you had connected the two of us to because you knew that you were going to mentor us and that we would be friends, which we are to this day. And I remember Tovi and I talking because it was like that morning and then everybody was breaking for lunch. And when you're the new kid, you're like, who am I going to have lunch with?
Yeah, exactly.
And so Tovi was like, well, let's just ask Pam if we can go with them. And I remember thinking, oh, is that okay? Because I mean, really, in large part, you were still my teachers instead of my colleagues. But we just muscled our way right into that MALB group. And then we became the junior MALBs.
That's right.
Which was so great.
You didn't have to muscle too hard.
We didn't. You were very loving and wonderful. So I remember that first weekend we all went up and there was probably 20 people there, wasn't there?
There was.
25 people there. And then the next year it dwindled down to 10. And then that 10 became the same group that went for, do you know how many years we went?
Well, over 20.
Every Veterans Day weekend for 20 years, the 10 of us went to Yosemite. And then
sometimes on other times,
Sometimes in the spring too. That's right, or in the winter even.
Yeah.
What do you feel like? How did that idea of having kind of mentors among your contemporaries, and then the young ones, the juniors, who are now all in our 50s, by the way. How did that inform you professionally and maybe personally?
First of all, personally, I just feel like hanging around younger people keeps you younger. Not childish. I mean, I don't need to have a ton of younger friends, but I just don't see and feel age too much. First of all, I forget how old I am except when I'm walking around, but also, so it just the personal vitality, the physical vitality. And then there were so many of you who were doing your vision boards. And that was just such a foreign thing for me. And I did kind of create a vision boards through the wildflowers, but it was never, again, I just couldn't get the blotchy thing. I had to do more linear, which probably is the math teacher in me. But, you were out doing, I just love the purposefulness. I felt like I fell into teaching, and that I didn't plot out my career. I just knew I wanted to be interested in what I was doing all the time. So if I wasn't interested, it was time to move on to something else. Yeah, I love the purposefulness, and then just the new ideas. Tovi and I had so much fun when she was my student teacher planning curriculum together. And I remember I'd taught Of Mice and Men for a number of years, and she brought in Dorothea Lange's photographs, and just a wonderful lesson, which is so open-ended for those kids that need that kind of lesson, and yet also brought the history to it. So it was just kind of like all these wonderful new ideas, and coming straight from the college, it was just, and I was like, so I always used those photographs, personal vitality and new ideas. And I wasn't done learning. And being with you all made me not want to be done learning.
When you were my mentor, we kept a journal back and forth. And it was so good for me. And I remember you saying, I've tried these journals with other people and they don't work. You have to do other things.
It worked perfectly.
It worked perfectly for us.
Because you like to write.
I do. Well, yeah, I guess that's true. But it makes me think that mentoring has a lot of similarities to teaching. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It's just teaching someone who's grown up.
What do you feel like the hardest thing was for you to learn as a teacher?
I just had to keep reminding myself, don't take students' behavior personally.
Yes.
They come to your classroom with stuff you just don't know about. And somehow, if you expect them to modify themselves to you, I mean, yes, I do, but no, I don't. Yes, when you come to my classroom, you should be on time. You should have your materials. I expect you to listen. And again, maybe this came from being a mom. I sent my kids off to school in some bad frame of mind. Getting kids up in the morning, get him out the door, and try to get to work on time because a bell rings. You can't really be late. And yeah, so it was kind of like, what happened to them before they came to maybe the last class. I mean, I've talked to kids and say, why suddenly is your grade going down? Well, they were having a really hard time with another teacher. And so we worked on how help them find ways to solve that problem and to make that better. Well, I remember one girl who came into school, and she had gone to a high school where the high school classes were segregated. So the kids in the flats were in one kinds of classes, and the kids who were in the hills were in other kinds of classes, and she was in the flats. And so all you had to do was be on time, because the teacher locked the door if you were not on time, and then you couldn't come in the class. And then you would sit quietly and do the dittos. So she hits my class, and suddenly she has to be able to write essays on Macbeth. So we spent a lot of time together, and she would say, oh, this is bad. It's the first of the month. Her mother would get paid and would go off and buy drugs and go to a motel and use them until the money was gone. So let's give her a break, huh? We just don't know. I mean, and sometimes I would say to, somebody would be yelling at me, and I go, do I yell at you? Oh, no. I said, well, then let's just calm our voices down. Only emotionally involved I'm going to get is in loving you.
Yes.
And caring about you.
Oh, my God, yes.
I'm not going to get all involved because I think you're disrespecting me. I had a student teacher once that, the kids really say things to you that are very disrespectful. I said, like what? Like I hadn't been hearing it. And I said, well, do you ever listen to how I talk to them? We're just talking, joking, and it never gets I just never thought about, I never said once to a kid that in my memory, well, that's disrespectful. They're just trying to preserve themselves. One of my favorite mentees, who's now teaching English, AP English at a Bay Area high school. Yeah. One time I said, will you please come up here? And we were doing some sort of grammar lesson. And she said, no.
Oh.
I know. The rest of the class gasped. But she was a good and serious student. And so I knew there was something else going on. And then I called the next student, and he, of course, was a jokester. So he said no. And I said, get up here.
Yeah.
and that, again, is another thing. It's like not all kids are the same.
Yes.
And the way you treat one kid is just, you have to know exactly where to push and which to shove. And so I had got them together doing something toward the end of the class, and I called her into the room, and we brainstormed things she could say besides no.
Right.
It could be, I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson, I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry, I don't really understand it and don't feel comfortable. I'm sorry I had a really bad day. Just this kind of thing. And of course, the irony is I ended up helping her out during her student teaching. And one of my first observations that I had, she had a rule where kids couldn't say no. And one of the kids said no to her. I could hardly keep a straight face in the corner. But she's turned out to be the most amazing teacher. And of course, where she teaches, they love her because she was just really amazing. Amazing.
What's so beautiful about that, what you said earlier about how education twists a little bit of something, tweaks it, and then renames it, right? You're describing what the warm demander pedagogy, right? This idea that I can be warm and I can be loving and I can also demand your excellence, because anything less than your best is not worthy of you. And I remember learning that from you as a student, and I remember learning that from you as someone you were mentoring. Those first few years were so hard for me. I was a disaster in my life. I was a disaster in my classroom. And I remember you saying, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? No judgment, no shame. Let's just let's work this out. And this notion of a child telling you no, that she won't go up and speak, and that you didn't take that personally and throw her out, right?
Which some people would.
Some people
Sadly.
would. They call it one of the D's, right? Disrespect, defiance, this really subjective.
I'm glad I don't know those words.
It's just this notion of, people getting offended when they don't need to get offended. It has
No.
nothing to do with you. This child is in pain, so let's let it ride. And but you always had firm boundaries. I mean, you mentioned you wrote referrals, and if you didn't have firm boundaries, you wouldn't, at some point, enough's enough.
Yes, one year when I taught Beloved, I think it may have been, I don't know whether it was the first or second time I taught it, but it was, one of those 2 times. And I always let my juniors and seniors pick their seats once a month. And I had a talk with them about how you learn differently in different parts of the room. So for the freshman and sophomore, I would assign seats and tell them, this is why, you were in the front last time, now you're in the back. And then I'm doing this intentionally. So I asked them. But this class was right after lunch, and these boys were late the day the people picked out their seats. So guess where they got to sit? Right under my nose. Because everybody else had picked seats farther away. And they were kind of like, oh my gosh, look at us. Here we are. We're up in front. And Beloved it's not, it requires a lot of attention to structure at the beginning. So I insisted on, I had a big chart, and they took notes, and I stopped all the time and everything. And the first day, these 4 boys put their head down, and I kept going over and just kind of knocking on the, proximity, of course, so they already selected their proximity, didn't they? so the lunch hour before the next class, I wrote out a referral. I filled in the name, the date, and I forget what else was on the referral, but I said on the thing, repeated sleeping in class despite requests otherwise. And I put it in the middle of the table. And 4 of them came in, and I saw them kind of looking around at it. And of course, the brave one, who turned out to be that very same kid who, said, leave me alone, right?
Yeah.
He picked it up. He said, who's this for? I said, I don't know yet. You will tell me. And of course, they paid attention the whole time.
Yeah.
So I did have boundaries.
We've got two more things that I want to talk with you about. One is just this idea that there's no silver bullet to fix schools, right? There's not one thing. And I think about it like a puzzle piece, right? We all have a puzzle piece, and you're a puzzler, so I know you know what I'm saying. We all have a puzzle piece that we have to be brave enough to put down on the table with everybody else, and then take the time to figure out how these pieces go together, right? We all have our own unique gift that we have to offer if we're really going to make positive change in schools. I'm wondering what you think your piece was or is as you look back on your decades-long career, and then even when you retired, you still continue to mentor teachers. What do you feel like was your piece that you left on the table?
Well, I think it's thinking about kids. Whatever structure we decide needs to be best for kids. Now, it can't be best for all kids. So as we're thinking about structures, we have to, I learned this from Cheryl Canberra. As a special ed teacher, I thought she was started out with that, well, what about these kids? The kids who are often forgotten in the mainstream. And then as an administrator, she was so good about thinking about all kids. So there should just be lots of different structures. So I guess my thing would be, well, all right, let's take a look. Who's going to thrive in this school? And then what about this child? Over here. The little boy up 2 doors up just came by, and I thought he might come in and start talking to me, only he doesn't really talk. He just makes noises, and he's in kindergarten. So what about this child? What is the best school for him? Is he getting the best schooling that he can get that's moving him forward? It's about not being lured in by programs that look good and flashy, and only keep your eyes on educating kids who are different. And
the individual, right? Our own individual humanity. Yeah.
Yes. I guess.
Yeah. That voice is so important.
Because it's just too easy nowadays. People just really want to, let's adopt this model. Because it's easy, because it's already thought out.
Yes.
But there is no one model that works.
I'm seeing that more and more too with curriculum. Like, well, if I just get the right curriculum, oh my God.
No,
Yeah,
no,
I know. And part of
yeah,
it is just because teaching is so hard. I mean, when I think back to my early years of teaching and the less pressure that existed then
yes,
compared to what our teachers are under now, I have compassion for like just that desire to find the thing to give me a bit of a breathing room, a bit of a
yeah,
break. It's
yes.
tough. So, at the end of every conversation we're going to talk about your what you would offer me if we were in the copy room. I think that this podcast is called Copy Room Conversations because I think so many gems of my learning happened
Hmm.
in that A-Hall copy room, as we waited for our turn at the machine or as we were slicing our papers or whatever. So imagine this. I'm cutting strips of paper with a paper cutter. You're punching holes in your handouts. Somebody else is running copies. What's one quick tip that you can offer us that will allow us to go into the first class of the day a little lighter, a little smarter, maybe with a little more love?
So you have to make your own joy. And I've done this in different ways. There was a time in elementary school where I had a very difficult principal, and everybody found him difficult. I found him hilarious, but I used to torture him because he was so easy to read, but still. So when I taught at that school, we were all really close. And so I would, on Thursday, I would go to the bowling league and I would collect jokes. I'm not I'm not natural joke teller. I just do weird things and that can be funny. But
Yes,
I
yes.
would intentionally collect jokes. And then the bell rang at like 8:25. So at 8:20, I'd go, okay, people. And I would tell a joke. And the bell would ring and everybody would leave the copy room laughing. Because
That's so
can you
funny.
imagine as you're a student and you see all these teachers streaming out of the teacher's room laughing?
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
and it's clearly a joyful laugh. The other thing is how I survive. One of my survival strategies from um, San Lorenzo High, I discovered in that year that I was trying to quit, that if Katrina and the Waves, Walking on Sunshine,
Hmm.
see, you could trace that and find out exactly when did I start at San Lorenzo High,
Yes, yes, yes.
came on the radio, and I'm a rock and roller. So I figured out, wait a minute, why do I have to wait for Katrina and the Waves to come on? I can
Yes.
buy my own CD. And so just as I would turn the corner going from Hesperian on to Llewellyn, I'd cue
Uh-huh.
up Walking on Sunshine and turn it up loud as it could be. And it could be like 6 o'clock in the morning. I didn't care.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
just play it and sing it all. There was time I had so I think every person should have a theme song,
Oh, that's
something that
great.
just, gets you going. And, some people have looked at me and going, okay, that's strange. I said, well, maybe that isn't your thing, but it worked for me.
Yeah.
Kept me teaching another 20 years. So
Oh my
there you
God.
go. And I
I
still,
love that so
if I hear
much.
Katrina and the Waves, I still get up and dance.
Well, I can't thank you enough for being here today and for all that you've done for me in the last 35 years of my life. I'm so grateful.
Well, I'm grateful that we are still friends and we still keep in contact with each other, even though I moved 2,650 miles away.
You did.
And thank you for giving me a chance to talk about something that as you see, I still clearly love.
Copy Room Conversations is brought to you in partnership with Dirt Path Publishing. What started as a small independent publishing house dedicated to publishing work for social impact now also includes coaching and editing services for writers, led by a small and mighty team of former high school teachers. These folks know how to have the hard conversations writers need to have in service to producing their very best work. And they know how to have those hard conversations with love. For more information about coaching and editing services for writers, visit dirtpathpublishing.com.